The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Adelaide Cottage as Prince William adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror. Another day of royal duties awaited him, but something felt different today. The house seemed unusually quiet, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Catherine had left early for a charity engagement in London, leaving William to handle the morning routine with their 3 children. George had already departed for school with his protection officer, while Louis was contentedly playing with his toy soldiers in the nursery under the watchful eye of their trusted nanny, Maria. But where was Charlotte? William called out her name as he made his way through the cottage's cozy rooms. The 9-year-old princess was known for her adventurous spirit and independent streak, qualities that both delighted and occasionally worried her parents. Unlike her more reserved older brother George, Charlotte possessed a fearless curiosity that often led her into unexpected situations. "Charlotte? Darling, where are you?" William's voice echoed through the corridors as he checked her bedroom, the playroom, and even the small library where she sometimes retreated with her favorite books about horses and adventures. Maria appeared at the top of the stairs, bouncing a giggling Louis in her arms. "Your Royal Highness, I thought Princess Charlotte was with you in the garden. She mentioned wanting to check on the new flowers that were planted yesterday." A slight frown creased William's brow. He had been in his study for the past hour, reviewing briefings for his upcoming environmental summit. The garden seemed like a logical place for Charlotte to explore, especially given her recent fascination with botany after visiting the Chelsea Flower Show with Catherine. William stepped outside into the crisp morning air, the dew still glistening on the carefully manicured lawns. The royal protection officers maintained a discreet presence around the property, but they were trained to give the family space within the secure perimeter of their home. "Charlotte!" he called again, his voice carrying across the garden. The silence that greeted him was unsettling. Usually, his daughter would respond immediately, her cheerful voice calling back with an explanation of whatever fascinating discovery had captured her attention. He walked the familiar paths of their private garden, past the rose bushes that Catherine tended with such care, beyond the small vegetable patch that the children helped maintain. The morning was peaceful, with only the sound of birds chirping in the ancient oak trees that bordered their property. It was then that William noticed something that made his pulse quicken. The gate that led to the woodland area beyond their garden stood slightly ajar. This particular gate was always kept locked, leading to a section of Windsor Great Park that, while still within the broader royal estate, was less controlled and monitored than their immediate grounds. William's training kicked in immediately. Years of security briefings had taught him to assess potential threats quickly and methodically. Charlotte was an intelligent child, but she was still only 9 years old. The woodland beyond the gate, while beautiful, contained natural hazards that could pose risks to an unaccompanied child. He pulled out his phone and speed-dialed the head of their protection detail, Inspector James Morrison. The phone rang twice before Morrison's crisp voice answered. "Your Royal Highness? James, I need you to locate Charlotte immediately. She appears to have left the secure garden area and may have entered the woodland section through the eastern gate." There was a brief pause, and William could hear the subtle change in Morrison's tone as he shifted into crisis management mode. "Understood, sir. I'm coordinating with the team now. Can you confirm when you last saw the princess?" William thought quickly, reconstructing the morning's events. "Approximately an hour ago at breakfast, she mentioned wanting to explore the new plantings, but she's not in the garden. The woodland gate is open." "We're mobilizing immediately, sir. I recommend you remain at the cottage while we conduct the search." But William was already moving toward the gate, his protective instincts as a father overriding any security protocols. "I'm going to begin searching the immediate woodland area. Charlotte knows these paths, but I want to trace her most likely route. Sir, with respect, I must advise." "James, that's my daughter out there." William's voice carried an edge that brooked no argument. "Coordinate your team's search from the main paths, but I'm going to check the areas where Charlotte would naturally be drawn to explore." William ended the call and pushed through the gate into the woodland. The familiar paths of his childhood seemed different now, viewed through the lens of parental concern. Every shadow could hide a potential danger, every turn in the path a new worry. He knew Charlotte well enough to predict her likely behavior. She would be drawn to anything unusual or beautiful, a particularly interesting tree, a small stream, perhaps wildlife that had caught her attention. She was cautious by nature but possessed the confidence that came from growing up in a secure environment where adventure was generally safe. The path wound deeper into the woods, dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy above. William moved quickly but carefully, calling Charlotte's name every few steps. His mind began to race through worst-case scenarios, each more troubling than the last. After 20 minutes of searching, he heard voices ahead. His heart leaped with hope, but as he rounded the bend, he saw two of his protection officers emerging from a side path, their expressions grim. "Any sign of her?" William asked, though their faces had already provided the answer. "Not yet, sir," replied Officer Stevens. "But we found evidence that someone was definitely on these paths recently. Small footprints that could match the princess's shoes." William felt a mixture of relief and increased anxiety. Charlotte was resourceful and intelligent, but the woodland was vast, and there were areas that even he wasn't familiar with despite growing up on the royal estates. His phone buzzed with a text message from Catherine. "How are the children this morning? See you tonight. Love you all." William stared at the message, knowing he would have to tell his wife that their daughter was missing. But first he had to find Charlotte. Nothing else mattered in this moment except bringing his little girl home safely. The search expanded as more officers arrived, their professional efficiency a stark contrast to the mounting tension William felt building in his chest. Each passing minute felt like an hour, and he found himself questioning every parenting decision, every moment of freedom they had given their children. Inspector Morrison approached with a radio in his hand. "Sir, we've expanded the search to include the areas near the old hunting lodge." It's possible the princess was curious about the historical buildings in this section. William nodded, his throat tight with worry. The old hunting lodge was nearly a mile from their garden, farther than Charlotte had ever ventured alone, but she was fascinated by history and old buildings, always asking questions about the stories behind the ancient structures scattered throughout the royal properties. As they organized the expanded search, William's phone rang. The caller ID showed his private secretary's number, reminding him that his day was packed with official engagements that would need to be canceled or postponed if Charlotte wasn't found soon. But those concerns seemed trivial now. The only thing that mattered was his daughter's safety. And with each passing moment, his worry transformed into something deeper and more urgent. This wasn't just about a curious child who had wandered too far from home. Something felt fundamentally wrong about the situation, and William's instincts as both a father and someone trained in crisis management were telling him that Charlotte was in real danger. The morning sun climbed higher, but the shadows in the woodland seemed to grow darker as the search continued. William pressed forward, determined to find his daughter before whatever situation she had encountered could become something far worse than a simple case of childhood adventure. Gone too far. Time was running out, and William could feel the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. As the future King of England, he was accustomed to pressure and high-stakes situations, but this was different. This was personal. This was his child, and he would stop at nothing to bring her home safely. The search had been going on for over an hour when Officer Stevens's radio crackled to life with an urgent transmission. "Base to Team 3, we have visual contact with the princess. Repeat, visual contact established." William's heart pounded as he grabbed the radio from Stevens's hand. "This is Prince William." "What's her condition? Where is she?" "Sir, she's approximately 400 meters northeast of your current position, near the old stone bridge over Meadowbrook Stream. However, sir..." The officer's voice hesitated, and William felt ice form in his stomach. "However? What? Speak clearly." "She's not alone, sir. There appears to be an adult male with her, and the situation looks concerning." William broke into a sprint, his formal shoes slipping on the woodland floor as he raced toward the coordinates. Inspector Morrison and two other officers flanked him, their hands instinctively moving to their concealed weapons as they processed the implications of the radio transmission. The old stone bridge had been built centuries ago as part of the estate's original hunting infrastructure. It was a picturesque spot that photographers often requested for royal family portraits, but it was also isolated and far from the main patrol routes. As they approached the location, William signaled for quiet. Through the trees, he could hear voices. Charlotte's unmistakable laugh mixed with the deeper tones of an unfamiliar man. The sound of his daughter's laughter should have been reassuring, but something about the context made William's protective instincts scream warnings. Inspector Morrison placed a firm hand on William's arm and whispered urgently, "Sir, we need to assess the situation before taking action. If this individual has hostile intentions, our approach could escalate the danger." But William was already moving forward, using the thick oak trees as cover. What he saw when he gained a clear line of sight made his blood run cold and his fury ignite simultaneously. Charlotte stood on the narrow stone parapet of the bridge, her arms outstretched for balance as she attempted to walk across like a tightrope performer. The drop to the rocky stream bed below was at least 12 feet, certainly enough to cause serious injury, or worse if she fell. But what made the situation exponentially more dangerous was the man encouraging her dangerous behavior. William recognized him immediately, Marcus Thornfield, a freelance photographer who had been repeatedly warned away from royal properties. Thornfield had a history of aggressive pursuit of unauthorized photographs, and had been the subject of several restraining orders for harassment of various royal family members. "That's it, Princess. Just a few more steps and we'll have the perfect shot," Thornfield called out, holding an expensive camera with a massive telephoto lens. "You look so brave and adventurous up there, just like a real princess should." Charlotte beamed at the praise, her 9-year-old mind unable to process the manipulation and danger she was being subjected to. She took another precarious step along the narrow stone ledge, her small arms windmilling as she fought to maintain her balance. William felt a rage unlike anything he had ever experienced. This man was deliberately putting his daughter in mortal danger for the sake of sensational photographs that would undoubtedly be sold to tabloids around the world. The images of a young royal child in peril would be worth thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of pounds to the right publication. "You're doing wonderfully," Thornfield continued, his camera clicking rapidly as he captured image after image of Charlotte's dangerous performance. "Just hold that pose for a moment longer." Inspector Morrison was already coordinating a tactical approach through his radio, but William couldn't wait for backup procedures. His daughter was one wrong step away from a potentially fatal fall, and this predator was actively encouraging her to take greater risks. William emerged from the tree line with the force and authority that came from years of military training and royal duty. His voice carried across the stream with unmistakable command and barely controlled fury. "Charlotte, stay exactly where you are and do not move another step." Both Charlotte and Thornfield spun toward the source of the voice. Charlotte's face lit up with delight at seeing her father, but her sudden movement caused her to wobble dangerously on the narrow ledge. "Papa! Look what I'm doing. This nice man is taking pictures of me being brave like the princesses in my storybooks." Thornfield's expression shifted immediately from predatory satisfaction to cornered panic as he realized he had been discovered. He continued photographing frantically, knowing that these final shots of the dramatic confrontation might be the most valuable of all. "You need to stay calm, Princess," William called out, forcing his voice to remain steady despite the terror and rage coursing through him. "I need you to very slowly sit down on the ledge and wait for Papa to help you down." But Thornfield wasn't finished with his exploitation. "Don't listen to him, Princess. You're almost to the other side. Just a few more steps and you'll have completed your brave adventure." The man's continued encouragement of dangerous behavior in the face of William's direct intervention pushed the prince beyond his limits. The fury that had been building since he first discovered Charlotte missing exploded into something primal and protective. "Get away from my daughter now!" William's roar echoed through the woodland, carrying the full weight of his authority as both a father and a future king. But even as he shouted, William was moving. He vaulted over the low stone wall that bordered the stream and began wading through the knee-deep water toward the bridge. If Charlotte fell, he would be in position to try to catch her, or at least break her fall. Inspector Morrison and his team emerged from the tree line simultaneously, surrounding Thornfield with practiced efficiency. The photographer found himself facing 3 armed protection officers, each trained to neutralize threats to the royal family. "Sir, I need you to put the camera down and step away from the princess immediately," Morrison commanded, his weapon drawn but held at the ready position. Thornfield's eyes darted between the officers, clearly calculating his options. The camera in his hands represented a fortune in potential sales, but the men surrounding him represented the very real possibility of years in prison for child endangerment and stalking. Charlotte, meanwhile, remained balanced on the narrow ledge, her child's mind struggling to process the sudden tension and shouting around her. The adventure that had seemed so exciting moments before now felt confusing and frightening. "Papa, I'm scared," she called out, her voice small and uncertain. "The man said I was being brave, but everyone seems angry now." William's heart shattered at the tremor in his daughter's voice. In that moment, his rage at Thornfield transformed into something even more dangerous. The cold, calculated fury of someone with the power to destroy lives and the motivation to use it. "It's going to be all right, darling," William called back, forcing warmth into his voice despite the circumstances. "Papa's going to help you down, and then we're going home for hot chocolate and biscuits with Louie." But Thornfield made one final desperate gambit. Instead of surrendering, he raised his camera again and began shooting rapid-fire photographs of the entire scene. William wading through the stream, Charlotte perched precariously on the bridge, the armed officers surrounding him. "This is going to be the story of the century," he shouted triumphantly, the future king's daughter in mortal peril, the dramatic rescue. This will be front-page news around the world. That's when William understood the true scope of what they were dealing with. This wasn't just a dangerous situation that had developed spontaneously. Thornfield had deliberately lured Charlotte into danger, specifically to create this exact scenario. The man had planned to profit from photographing a royal child in a life-threatening situation. The realization that someone would deliberately endanger his daughter for financial gain pushed William into a state of cold, controlled rage that would reshape how he viewed security protocols for his entire family. This was no longer just about rescuing Charlotte from immediate danger. This was about ensuring that nothing like this could ever happen again. As Inspector Morrison's team moved to physically restrain Thornfield, and William positioned himself to catch Charlotte if she fell, the true scope of the morning's events began to crystallize. What had started as a simple case of a curious child wandering off had revealed a calculated attempt to exploit and endanger a member of the royal family. Charlotte finally began to understand that something was very wrong. The shouting, the presence of the protection officers, and her father's obvious distress penetrated her 9-year-old consciousness. She began to cry, her small body shaking as she realized she was trapped on the narrow ledge, with angry adults surrounding her. William's protective instincts reached their absolute limit as he watched his daughter's distress. The man responsible for putting Charlotte in this position was about to discover exactly what happened when someone threatened the child of the future King of England. The rescue of Charlotte from the stone bridge required every ounce of William's military training and paternal instinct. Standing waist-deep in the cold stream, he positioned himself directly below his trembling daughter, while Inspector Morrison climbed carefully onto the bridge structure from the safe end. "Charlotte, sweetheart, I need you to listen very carefully to Papa," William called up to her, his voice steady despite the terror he felt watching her small form shake with fear on the narrow ledge. "Inspector Morrison is going to come toward you very slowly, and when he gets close enough, you're going to sit down and let him help you." The little princess nodded tearfully, finally understanding that her adventure had become something dangerous and frightening. Marcus Thornfield continued to snap photographs, even as 2 protection officers restrained him, his desperation to capture every moment of the drama overriding any concern for the child's welfare. It took 20 agonizing minutes to safely extract Charlotte from the bridge. When Inspector Morrison finally lifted her down into William's waiting arms, the prince held his daughter so tightly that she protested she couldn't breathe. Only then did the full magnitude of what could have happened crash over him. "I'm sorry, Papa," Charlotte whispered against his neck as he carried her toward the woodland path. "The man said you would be proud of me for being brave. He said princesses should have adventures and that Mama would love the pictures." William's jaw clenched as he processed his daughter's words. Thornfield hadn't simply stumbled across Charlotte during her innocent exploration. He had deliberately manipulated a 9-year-old child, using her desire to please her parents and her romantic notions about princess adventures to lure her into danger. As they emerged from the woodland, William could see the full scale of the security response that had mobilized during the crisis. Additional protection officers had arrived from Windsor Castle, and he could spot the discreet positions of counter-surveillance teams who had been deployed to ensure no other unauthorized individuals were lurking in the area. Catherine's car was pulling up the drive as they reached Adelaide Cottage. William had called her during the rescue operation, and she had immediately cancelled her London engagements to return home. The look of relief and horror on her face as she saw Charlotte safe in William's arms was a mirror of his own emotions. "Thank God," Catherine breathed as she gathered their daughter into her own embrace. "When you called and said she was missing, I thought my heart would stop." But even as they were reunited as a family, William's mind was already moving beyond the immediate crisis to the larger implications. Inspector Morrison approached with his preliminary report, his expression grim. "Sir, we've secured Thornfield, and he's being transported to the station for questioning. However, there are some disturbing elements to this situation that go beyond simple trespassing and child endangerment." William settled Charlotte with Catherine and Lewis in the cottage's sitting room, ensuring she was warm and safe before stepping outside with Morrison for a private briefing. "What did you find?" William asked, though he suspected he wasn't going to like the answer. "Thornfield had been conducting surveillance on your family for at least 3 weeks, Morrison reported. "We found detailed notes about your daily routines, the children's schedules, security patrol patterns, and specific vulnerabilities in the estate's perimeter. This wasn't opportunistic. It was a planned operation." The information hit William like a physical blow. Someone had been watching his children, studying their habits, looking for opportunities to exploit them. The violation felt almost as serious as if someone had broken into their bedroom at night. "There's more, sir," Morrison continued. "He had contracts with 3 different tabloid publications for exclusive photographs of the children in unguarded moments. The payments were substantial enough to make this a highly profitable venture for him." William's fury, which had been temporarily suppressed by relief at Charlotte's safety, reignited with new intensity. This man had turned his daughter into a commodity, a source of profit to be extracted through deliberate manipulation and endangerment. "I want a complete review of our security protocols," William said, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of royal command. "I want to know how someone was able to conduct 3 weeks of surveillance without detection. I want to know how he gained access to our property. And I want to know what legal options we have to ensure he never comes near my family again." But even as he spoke, William knew that the legal system's response would likely be insufficient for the magnitude of what had occurred. Thornfield might face charges for trespassing and child endangerment, but the deeper violation of deliberately targeting a royal child for exploitation would be harder to prosecute effectively. Over the following hours, as Charlotte napped safely in her room and the immediate crisis subsided, William found himself grappling with a fundamental shift in his understanding of his family's vulnerability. They had always known that public life came with security risks, but this felt different. This was someone targeting his children not for political or ideological reasons, but purely for financial gain. Catherine joined him in his study as the afternoon light began to fade. She had spent the day staying close to Charlotte, who seemed to be processing the morning's events with the resilience that children often display, but both parents knew the psychological impact might emerge later. "The protection team wants to implement additional restrictions," Catherine said quietly. "No more unsupervised time in the gardens. Constant escort for any outdoor activities. Essentially, the children would need to live like they're under siege." William rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of impossible choices. They had worked so hard to give their children as normal a childhood as possible within the constraints of royal life. The idea of further restricting their freedom felt like allowing Thornfield to win, even from his jail cell. "There has to be another way," William said. "I won't let that man destroy our children's ability to be children, but I also can't risk something like this happening again." Inspector Morrison returned that evening with updates from Thornfield's interrogation. The news was even worse than they had initially understood. "He's been building profiles on all 3 of your children," Morrison reported. Charlotte was just his first target because her personality made her the easiest to manipulate. He had plans for George and Lewis as well, different scenarios designed to create photogenic, dangerous situations that he could capture and sell. The revelation that all 3 of his children had been targeted sent William into a state of cold, calculating anger that Catherine had rarely seen in her husband. This wasn't just about one morning's crisis. This was about a predator who had systematically planned to exploit their entire family. William spent the next several hours on secure phone calls with senior officials at Scotland Yard, the Crown Prosecution Service, and private security consultants. By the time he finished, it was clear that Thornfield would face the full weight of both criminal prosecution and civil litigation. But William wasn't satisfied with reactive measures. He authorized a comprehensive investigation into how many other individuals might be conducting similar surveillance operations against the royal family. The scope of the investigation would examine everything from paparazzi networks to social media stalking to unauthorized merchandise featuring the children's images. Late that night, after the children were asleep and Catherine had retired, William found himself standing at Charlotte's bedroom door watching his daughter sleep peacefully in her bed surrounded by her favorite stuffed animals and storybooks. The innocence of the scene was a stark contrast to the calculated malevolence that had targeted her that morning. In that moment, William made a series of decisions that would fundamentally change how the royal family approached security and privacy. Thornfield's actions had crossed a line that William hadn't even known existed, and the response would be proportionate to the violation. The man who had endangered Princess Charlotte for profit was about to discover that there were consequences for threatening the children of the future King of England that extended far beyond anything the criminal justice system could impose. William's network of contacts in government, law enforcement, media, and private security would ensure that Thornfield's life became very complicated very quickly. But more importantly, new protocols would be established to protect not just his own children, but all royal family members from similar exploitation. What had happened to Charlotte would serve as a catalyst for the most comprehensive review of royal security procedures in decades. As William finally made his way to his own bedroom, he reflected on how a single morning had changed everything. His fury at the violation of his family's safety was matched by his determination that no other parent would have to experience what he and Catherine had endured that day. The man who had put Princess Charlotte in danger had awakened something protective and implacable in her father. The consequences of that awakening would extend far beyond anything Marcus Thornfield could have anticipated when he began his surveillance of the royal family.